Welcome to the Music for the Soul podcast, where we talk honestly about difficult things. This is a place where music, hope, and healing come together. I'm Becky Nordquist.
And I'm Steve Seiler. Boy, I am excited about today. We have with us one of my dearest friends in the world, super talented guy, Mr. Corey Niemchick. Corey, welcome.
Hello, Steve. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Corey. We're so glad that you're here today. And he's not just your dear friend. I like to call him my dear friend, too.
Nope, just
share.
mine. Only mine.
I've been looking forward to this because Steve and I have had so many great talks sitting on a front porch and talking about life. And now I love Becky, and it's nice to talk with the both of you.
You guys have some history I'm excited to hear about. Yeah, we'll just pull back the curtain maybe a little bit today.
Well, the way I met Corey was truly remarkable. You had a full-time job and were doing concerts on the weekends as a Christian recording artist, going by the name of Corey Emerson for some of the fans out there.
Yes.
And you sent me a letter about how one of my songs that you had recorded had impacted a family with a child who was ill. Do you remember that?
Absolutely. I do. The song was called All of My Hope.
Yes. And you were the first recording artist to ever reach out to me and tell me how a song had been important to your audience. And I was so touched by that, so moved by that. I thought, I got to meet this guy.
Well, I wanted to know what the inspiration was behind the song. So as I was on stage, we're sitting behind the piano and sharing, how I wrote the song or what inspired that song. Or everybody would say, wow, what was the meaning behind that song you sang, All of My Hope? And at that time, I think it was charting on Christian radio. I had no answer. You know what? I don't know the meaning behind the song. So that's when I worked through the record label and
hunted me down.
Hunted you down.
And what was interesting about that was I actually wrote that song from a place of, I won't say hopelessness, but of longing for hope, because my son had just been born with spina bifida. And I was, begging of God, give me hope here as a parent of a special needs child, so that the song would then move an audience member who had a son who was dealing with a disease. It was one of those God math moments where the connections were so beautiful.
I loved it. It was very powerful, and it had such a powerful chorus. And gosh, I think it made top 10. I think that was one of my first top 10 songs.
Well, certainly a top 10 moment for me because it introduced us.
Yes.
Well, I was on the other end of the radio when that song came out, and I'm so embarrassed to admit this now. I mean, I guess it's not embarrassed. Okay, I really was a fan, Corey. I have to be honest. I mean, I didn't know that you were a West Michigan person, but I am a West Michigan person, and you were played all the time. So I remember, I think it was when Steve I didn't know your last name. I didn't know you by Niemchick, or how do you say it?
Niemchick, yeah.
I only knew you as Emerson. I'm like, wait, what? You've got to be kidding. You know him too?
I know him really from his days with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but of course later on he branched out and did the solo thing.
I'm sure we draw that connection. There is no connection there.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for your years of service in the CCM world. Many don't realize that really is a service at times. So I hear you were the vice president of a large distribution company, but then you left all of that and you started storytelling pictures. So what was the motivation for the change?
Oh, well, we're celebrating our 20th year this year. So as starting a small business, we beat all the odds. I liked the company that I worked for. It didn't have the strongest leadership, but I just had more creativity than what I had channels to utilize it in with that company. And it was a very comfortable lifestyle, provided great income, and our kids were in private school and a nice house on a lake, and all this stuff. And I just I didn't have a peace. I guess that's the best way of saying it. And I knew that I wanted to do something that would impact lives and affect change. I didn't want my tombstone to read that, I worked with Home Depot, or I worked with Lowe's, or even though, those are important jobs, but it just wasn't me. In all actuality, music career ended up being connected to how I started Storytelling Pictures. Was one of the people at the record label had a friend who was going through a divorce and said, I was working on songs for the first album, and I wrote a song called Hope. And there's a line in it, like an artist without a canvas and a potter without clay, you bear the loss and you're wanting back the day. And how you wish to God you didn't know now what you didn't know then. Where's the hope? Where's the healing? And he was going through a pretty vicious divorce. And so Brian, this mutual friend, says, why don't you take that song and play it for him? He's in my basement, and he's living with me for a couple of days while they sort through their marriage, and he could really benefit from this song. So I go to Brian's house. It's late at night, and I'm sitting at the piano, and I'm playing the song. And John comes up, that's his name. And he's sitting on the couch, and his face is red and swollen because he'd been crying. And I kind of look at Brian when John was wiping his eyes, and I'm like, should I be doing this? But he just kind of nodded at me, so I played the song. And John just started sobbing. And then, so I thought I should just now get up and leave. And because I really didn't know him that well, and he was good friends with Brian, and maybe this was a good time for them to talk. But he goes, would you play it again? So I played it again. I played it like 3 or 4 times. And we just then became friends after that. We'd meet for coffee, and I'd come to find out that he was a cinematographer, and I liked the work that he did, and it was missing something. Boy, it's a long story, but we basically said, let's do this. Let's start a film production company that will be different, where we'll focus mostly on the whys, WHYS, and not just do product stuff and image pieces, even though we did quite a bit of that. But we really wanted to do stuff that was going to change people's life and touch people's hearts. And so we started in 2004, and we exploded.
What I hear in that story is that in serving a total stranger, somebody made a request of you, and you came, and your heart was to serve a total stranger who was going through something difficult, and God gave you in return the passion that you were looking for, and kind of made your dream come true.
It's beautiful.
What? Steve, that's why I love you. I never thought of that. But you know what? That's right. And it's not like we didn't pray about it. And my wife and I, we talked about it. I mean, we had talked about this for 2 years. And when we finally decided to pull the trigger, it's just like, we're going to do this. I believe God's in it. And if it fails, I'll land on my feet. I'll do whatever I have to do to provide for my family. But
I love it too, that it happened on a stage that you wouldn't have expected it to. I mean, literally, as your heart unfolds for this guy in a living room, it's that blooming where you're planted in the moment, right?
And when you are planted someplace, we think, okay, God, I know you want me here. We had no idea what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start this company. And one of our very first projects was about the Dutch resistance and the role of the Netherlands in World War II and what they did to resist Nazi occupation. So we spent months filming this thing. It was this huge budget, and we'd never done a documentary before. But we ended up putting this thing together, and it wins all these awards, and it's on television, and we do the speaking tour, and it never stopped. And
didn't that wind up in the Holocaust Survivor Museum in DC?
Yep. Yeah. And we got recognized by the Holocaust museums, recognized by the Dutch consulate, something. And it was, it's like, see the power of telling an effective story and the power of the visual image, is what we want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to change people's lives. I want to touch people's hearts.
Well, I don't know exactly when you became the visual arm for Music for the Soul, but it was around that same time. And I got to experience you guys working on that piece, and it was profound.
You remember one of our first conversations of how we started working together?
Go ahead.
I just remember calling you about the cover of somebody's daughter saying, oh, what is this? Remember?
In a bad way.
Rainbow jacket and the turtleneck and like
Corey's saying, I'm all about visual, and this is not working.
Not a visual we want.
Yeah.
Steve and I started working together. He had this project called More Beautiful about breast cancer survivors. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how God works when he intersects all the paths. So Steve is working on this. At the same time, I had this dear friend, And she tells me about this reoccurring dream that she had. She had, I don't know, stage 3 or something like that, breast cancer. And she kept having this reoccurring dream of her and her family at an amusement park. And it was nighttime and it was dark. And she said it was kind of cold and windy. And they are drawn to this roller coaster. And so they go through all the little corrals to get to each person. Each one in her family lines up to get in their own lane so they can get in their own car, but only her gate opens. She has to take this ride alone. And so she gets on it and her family's like reaching for her, but their gates don't open, and she takes off. And she's going through this roller coaster and it's dimly lit. She can't see where the twists and turns or the peaks or valleys are. Every time she comes through the station, it doesn't stop, but something about her changes. The first time she comes through, she can taste bile in her mouth. The second time is she's in a hospital gown. The third time, she has no hair. And there was one point in this dream that she said when she crested the highest peak, she was like above the clouds. And as far as she could see, there were these roller coaster peaks, and they were all cresting with a roller coaster car that had a single rider on it. In other words, she felt like nobody knew what she was really going through unless they themselves went through it, another woman. And when she told us this, I mean, we're just crying in our conference room. We're going, oh my gosh, we need to make this into a music video. And I said, and I know just the person to partner with. And so I talked to Steve about it, and yeah, let's do it. And so Steve, remember, it came down and we co-wrote Wildest Ride on Earth.
Yes. And I remember where I was sitting when we had this phone call. I was coming back from somewhere. I was sitting in my driveway with the car door open, listening to you tell this. And when you said, do you think we could write a song about that? And I'm like, my goodness, I've written songs about a whole lot less. There's a lot to work with there. And you did come down and we wrote that song, and the video that was created kind of walks through the images you've just described.
Oh my gosh.
I remember the first time you showed me the final cut of it. I was sitting in your conference room, and the thought I had was, how come I get to be the one to share this with the world? When I started Music for the Soul, I had a vague idea of how we wanted to help and why, but this was just beyond anything I could have ever imagined.
We had to literally rent a theme park roller coaster, and we had to scaffold it and light it. We had to hire female talent that was willing to shave her head. That was a big one. We did a casting call, and when these women found out they needed to shave their heads, like everybody drops out.
Except Lauren.
Lauren, we're having dinner one night, and that's just because our kids hung out together, went to the same school, and her husband and I were coaching a little baseball team. And I'm telling her about this, and she goes, "Well, I'd shave my head for that." And I look at her and like, "You are it."
So great.
Talent. And of course, we paid her to shave her head. But
Not only to shave her head, but to ride on a roller coaster. I think it was 39 times in the middle of the night.
Lord bless her.
I mean, and it was hard because it was in the middle of the night and it was cold, and she just had on that hospital gown. She would come through. We'd have to stop the roller coaster, cover her with blankets, with warm blankets. And she wanted to quit. She was so miserable. And this friend of mine who had this dream, who was going through the cancer, said, "I know exactly how you feel, but you can't quit." And we caught all this on mic, not meaning to, but it's just because Linda was mic, because she was kind of overseeing this whole project as somewhat like an executive producer, because it was her story. And she's hugging Lauren, and Lauren says, "I can't do this anymore." And Linda was like, "You have to. You're a mom, you're a spouse, you're a daughter. You have to." And it was some really beautiful, poignant, unscripted moments. And
that wound up being the documentary that's on the DVD.
That's on the more beautiful DVD. Yeah.
It's such an incredible project, and the song and video. Can we just take a moment and tell our listeners where they can find that specifically in case their interest is piqued in doing so?
Well, if they search Wildest Ride on Earth on YouTube, it does come up. They can also see it and connect with it at our website, musicforthesoul.org, and they would just type in Wildest Ride on Earth in the search bar, and there you go.
Definitely worth the time to pull it up. Even if you're not a cancer survivor, I just find that song is so applicable to so many coasters in life, right? I
Well, Linda
really,
says at the end, she says that she felt like God was impressing upon her heart that, what kept you safe on that roller coaster?
mm,
And she's like, well, the safety bar. And God was saying, well, who is your safety bar?
mhm,
Mm.
She's like, well, you are.
mm.
He goes, that's right. And
Beautiful.
that's why you're safe. And yeah, it was. So I think that was our first foray into taking the power of music
Mm,
and the power of the visual image and putting them together in a way that would change people's lives. And
Yeah.
then she's somebody's daughter.
Well, before we get into somebody's daughter, I'd like to veer back into the music lane for a second, because when we were working on the Dignity Project for caregivers, I told you about that. We were sitting in your den and I was describing what we were working on. And you told me about your grandmother
Oh
and
yeah.
her struggle with Alzheimer's. And you told me about a specific event that happened at the nursing home when you would go to visit her. And we wrote a song called You Should Hear Him Sing because you used to sing for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to play just a little bit of that right now.
The staff here knows my name, knows my routine. I come in after work and stay till she's asleep. I sit beside her bed, she talks to me. The only son of her son, I am her legacy. She speaks my name, but then looks at me and says, won't you sit with me and stay a while? My grandson's coming soon. I know you'd like him, he's a lot like you. And you should hear him sing.
Okay, so a couple things come to mind. One was the part where at the end of our recording, I wanted to put in a hymn that you might have sung to your grandmother while you were singing for her. And you weren't around, so I just made a suggestion, wrote it down. Well, I guess we'll sing What a Friend. Well, that's what we'll do. Put What a Friend here. And then you come back to me and said, how did you know? How did you know that's the song I always sang to my grandmother? That was her favorite song. I was like, I didn't know.
Yeah, that was a tough time. My grandmother was very influential in my life, and my folks divorced when I was 6, and she just was always there. She was that. She gave me this sense of stability, a sense of place, and oh my gosh, she encouraged me to go see who is now my wife when I was in college, and I was a broke college student, and she had all these great quips.
Wow.
Some were a little
mm.
irreverent,
I
but
like her already. Yeah.
she was a hoot. And the last couple of weeks of her life, in the worst stages of Alzheimer's, the nursing home was really close to our house. And so once the kids were in bed, I'd go there. Staff would let me in. They knew me well by that time. And she was catatonic. It was horrible. I mean, her arms and legs were turning black. So everything was kind of protecting her core. And she couldn't close her mouth anymore. And her tongue it was so swollen. It was starting to split. I was so mad at God. It's like, this is a wonderful woman who loved you, served you. Why is she suffering so this way? And she would just look off into space. But I would sit next to her and brush her hair and visit her every night and sing little songs in her ear and tell her what she meant to me. It's funny, before she got so bad, she would talk to me about me, not knowing it was me that she was talking to.
Mm.
And when you hear someone talking about you when you're not in the room, even though it was me, it's humbling. I had no idea I meant to her.
Mm.
I did.
Mm.
And yeah, I could just start bawling right now.
Well, let me just say to people, as long as we're telling people where they can hear things, I think your spoken word testimony, where you tell this story at length, it's called "What Kind of Quality of Life Is This?"
Yeah.
That is also at the Music for the Soul website, and well worth your time to listen. One of the most beautiful stories of God at work in an unexpected way that I have ever heard.
Yeah,
So
it
thank you
was
for sharing that with us.
ugly and beautiful.
Yeah. Just such a heartbreakingly beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing your heart and your talents. And so, Corey, your next video project was about an issue that's impacting my family. Somebody's daughter, a journey to freedom from pornography. How do you come up with visual representations for a topic that can be so triggering?
That is a great question. How do you talk about pornography without showing it? That's like, how do you sell a car without showing the car?
Right.
So our challenge was, how do we create this piece that doesn't provide any triggers? And I wish I had some sort of philosophical, I wish I could wax eloquent with, this is how you do it, but I don't. We just knew that we wanted to create things metaphorically that would communicate the truth of it without having to get specific. That's one thing. I mean, even Jesus spoke in metaphor, spoke in parables. And that's why, someone asked me why I enjoy my job. And I said, because the impact of my line of work, I get to knock down barriers. I get to knock down walls. I get to very softly reach through into somebody's inner being, into their soul, and like maybe just gently scratch or pick away at a scab to remove it, and to have them be willing to open themselves up and be vulnerable to understand the why behind what they're doing or what they're supporting or their nonprofit or whatever it is. It's always about the why. And visual communication, it simplifies communication. It reaches a wider audience. It transcends language barriers. It's global in its reach. So when we were thinking about somebody's daughter, the first thing that came to mind is with pornography, it's like, well, I'm only going to go this far. Like any sin, I'm only going to I'm only going to go out on the ice this far. Even though the sign on the shore says danger, thin ice, well, I'm just going to walk out just a little bit. We're always asking ourselves, how far can I go until it starts to crack and I fall in? We never tell ourselves, why don't I just stay off the pond?
Right.
And so sat down and looked at Steve's songs, went through the lyrics. We did the interviews with the people that are on the project, and a lot of their content helps formulate some of these visuals. To this day, it's still one of my favorite projects. I mean, we rented a 7-Eleven. We rented a high school swimming pool. We rented a train. There's a scene in there where we have this father, he's tucking his son into bed. And the whole thing behind this dad and his family is that he has this secret and he doesn't realize it, but it's slowly destroying his family. And it's going to feel like a freight train when it finally all comes crashing down. And so we thought, well, what better way than to have him tuck his son in bed, and he turns the light out. And when he goes to get up and walk away from his son, we cut to a wide shot, and oh my gosh, this little boy's twin bed is on a train track. And here comes this massive freight train screaming at him at 60 miles an hour. And I remember the first time I played that scene for my mom, she screamed because we cut right before the train impacts the bed. Well, the two are never in the same place at the same time. It's just the magic of cinematography. But it was powerful and it was effective.
I love the description you gave her of how you pulled that off with like rope and you guys.
Yeah, I was fooling my mom. Yeah, we just quick yanked him off the tracks really quick before the train hit. People, there were no children harmed in the making of that video.
Corey, that is cruel to do to your mother.
When you were talking about video transcending language, the most powerful moment in that project, other than when the train almost hits the bed, is when Shelley is trying to share what it feels like when you're a woman and you find out that your husband is looking at pornography.
Oh, yes.
And she can't speak. And she kind of waves her hand in front of her face and turns away. and we go to black. And then after several minutes, which is only a few seconds on screen, we come back to her once she's composed herself. But the body language of her literally not being able to formulate the words to describe her pain is more powerful than anything she ever could have said.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of the visual transcending language. It's like we heard her loud and clear in that moment. I actually call that the secret weapon moment of the project. Because if you can watch that as a man who's even dabbling in pornography, if you can watch that and not feel convicted and brokenhearted and say, not me, I won't be that guy to do that to the woman I love, then I can't help you. I mean, it's just that powerful. And as long as we're sending people to places, the video Corey was talking about, Never Shake His Hand, is the music video that has the train almost hitting the bed. And Somebody's Daughter, A Journey to Freedom from Pornography is the documentary and music project. And that's also available at musicforthesoul.org. You can search by title or by the topic of pornography. Recently, I was putting together kind of a way to introduce the ministry to people who didn't know about it. And somebody recommended that I, be able to give evidence of how our stuff was working and the difference it was making. So I thought, how do I do that? And they said, numbers. You got to show numbers. So I reached out to some therapists who I know use the Somebody's Daughter DVD. And this one woman, Marnie Faree, who runs Bethesda in Nashville, I asked her, can you give me an idea of how many lives this has touched, over the last several years? And she said, oh, I can tell you exactly how many, because I've used it with every client who's ever come through the door. And she called me back the next day and it was like 7,285, some ridiculous number. And, we always say, if we just touch one life, if we just help one person in the name of God, then it's enough, Lord. And to hear that is like, okay. So that's how powerful the piece was, that somebody who is committed to helping people with this issue uses it with everybody who comes through the door.
Wow, I did not know that. The rationale behind trying to come up with so many different metaphors within that particular song, Never Shake His Hand, was to be able to reach the largest audience. So nobody could say, well, the freight train thing, that's not really me. We had the fire going along the sidewalk and then going into the house and coming out of the laptop.
And you actually burned a real house down for that.
No, almost. We were still experimenting with a lot of things. But then okay, so our guy who was in the 7-Eleven and there's this pornography rack in front of him and he can't decide. And we would cut underneath to show his feet, to show that he was standing on thin ice. And then every time he gets closer to the rack, the ice cracks more and more. And he finally reaches for it and pulls a magazine up. And that's one of my most powerful moments that moves me, Steve, is when he falls through the ice. And we filmed this in a high school swimming pool. We had to put black all on the bottom of all these tarps. So it looked like an abyss. And I remember we had a camera guy that was underneath the water. And we also had a jib that was filming what was happening from up above. And my daughter, we used her as one of the daughters of this family. And seeing her just jump in, and all these people had to drop into the water and then try to reach for the surface, but they would continue to sink and disappear into this black hole. And seeing my own daughter at the end reaching for the surface and disappearing into this black hole, gosh, that was a powerful image. And it was our prayer that men would see that and realize that's what's happening. And I could talk for hours because the opportunity to work with Steve, and Steve, you have such powerful music. Gosh, we haven't even gotten into Becky's stuff with the project that we're starting to work on, Innocent Child, that kind of stuff, but be able to provide visual images to that. And this 1-2 punch, it's so necessary today in a culture where video is king.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to capture their attention span in that first 5 seconds, or they click on to something else. And so how do you create something that can be powerful and emotional and yet be very succinct and short? And that's what we do best. And working together in this regard is such an important thing.
Well, I have to say too, I love how you are committed to helping men and women but we're primarily talking about men's issues with pornography, helping them to see that what they do really matters. I think a lot of men just think they have no impact on people with their choices, but there's so many that ripple effect of what they choose every day. Or, I know my husband openly shares about his struggle, but that was one of the lies. He believed that it wasn't hurting anybody. And it was so deeply ingrained. And I think a lot of men believe that lie, that it's not hurting them, it's not hurting the people around them. And you mentioned, I believe it was Shelley, her testimony. And for women, I know so many, myself included, where that brokenness, again, it's kind of that roller coaster thing where you're up at the top above the clouds. And really, the only one that can understand what it really feels like is another person who's walked that same road. And all this music and the video, it connects all these things together so that you're not alone. And the impact of the visual is just beautiful too. I mean,
The song "Is It Me" that Shelley sings on the Somebody's Daughter project.
oh,
I've heard from women who said literally, "I thought
mhm,
I was insane,
mhm,
and then I heard this song and I realized I am not alone." I think that's our goal. That's Corey's goal as a filmmaker. My goal
mhm,
as a songwriter is for people to know that they are not the only one going through what they're going through,
mhm.
that God understands, God is present with them, and that there are other people out there who will walk with them, who have been on that road or who are on that road. I think that's probably the most destructive lie of the enemy. It's only you. You
Oh,
should feel
isolation.
ashamed. You
Mhm,
should feel ashamed because you're the only one who's ever been this
mhm,
disgusting or this worthless. Not so. Everybody has their stuff, right? Everybody has their stuff. My stuff's not your stuff,
mhm,
maybe, but my stuff is somebody's stuff.
mhm.
And I don't know if I'm sounding profound or like an idiot right now, but I think you know what I'm saying.
John,
No, but
man,
I think the point is too is to say not only are you not alone in this, but other people have survived it too. To know that there's
Right.
an other side to this vast cavern that you might be facing. There's another side where there is a shoreline that will come up to meet you eventually, and you can swim toward it too, because there's people that have been there in that water and they're there and they're waiting for you to arrive. And it's just, they'll even come into the water with you, you
Look at
know?
her going all visual, Corey. That's your end of
I
the
know
pond.
It's
shoreline. Okay,
contagious,
that's
you too. I
scary.
just need to hang around you both more.
John has a great line in the documentary part of She's Somebody's Daughter when he goes, "Here I was thinking, I'm the only person supporting this multi-billion."
Hmm. Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny, but it's not funny. But
But
that
it
is
is
the
kind
reality,
of like, what? Wait, when you hear it out loud, you're like,
right?
that's not even possible. Right. Right. So knowing that so many people have been impacted by your work, how does it make you feel?
Wow, that's a heavy question. How does it make me feel? I don't want to. I feel like if I say it makes me feel pretty good, I'm patting myself on the back. It continues to humble me. I put it this way, that despite my own vices, that God continues to use us in ways that we can't even imagine, that we don't even see.
Yes.
So when Steve will say, "Hey, I thought I'd share this email with you," or it's someone on the other side of the world or the other side of the country that says, "Wow, I watched this video and it saved our family, or it saved my marriage, or it saved my life." People will never meet. God's doing things. And this project was years ago. I'm excited about Innocent Child. I mean, what's that going to do? And it's nice. I think it's nice that we don't know how
Right.
impactful it is. And to just get little affirmations now and then, it's just that it's an affirmation knowing that, all right, thanks God.
Yeah.
Yes. When Becky talked earlier about pulling back the curtain, whenever I get discouraged, and there have been many times in this ministry where I've thought, that's it, I'm done. I
Mhm.
can't do this anymore. It's too hard. That's always when God goes, let me show you this. You know, oh, I can't quit. Look what happened. I got to stay at it. And so God's really gracious and kind, I think, that way. Since you've mentioned Innocent Child, I do want to offer people the opportunity to help bring that visualization to life. We are currently, Becky's astounded. I know that I'm actually going to talk about fundraising, but this is an expensive project. You can't create the kind of life changing imagery that
Mm.
Corey's talking about and rent restaurants and swimming pools and freight trains unless you have some support. So if the issue of childhood sexual abuse is one that has touched you or somebody that you love, you can go to our website, to our donate page, and at the drop down, Innocent Child is one of the options. We've raised about half of the funding. I think we're around 50,000 still to go. That might sound daunting, but every dollar that's given, supported by the heart of somebody who really cares about what we're doing, what God is wanting to do with this, gives impetus and power and momentum to the project. So please pray about that and consider doing that.
I'm just going to add to that, please. I know just recording the song has set me free. Often survivors, you're given a sentence that you didn't ask for, and it's a life sentence. And if you can take the shackles off of one person that has walked this road in a sentence that they didn't ask for as an innocent child, it could mean their freedom. I know that as I sang those words in the studio, I literally felt shackles fall off of me.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
and I just want to encourage you that if there's any place in you that is being tugged on with that topic, it doesn't matter. I think of the widow in the Bible who had like 2 coins or something. And, she gave what she could, and God multiplies. And so you might think, well, all I have is to sacrifice my latte today, which are now like $6, which is ridiculous, but that won't make any difference. Oh, yes, it will. It will make a difference. And I guarantee it's already made a difference in my life. And I'm just speaking on behalf of so many people out there that are walking this road and walking out a sentence they didn't ask for. So if you can do anything to help, I personally would be really appreciative and grateful as well.
When Steve shared the song with me, and we started putting together the treatment, and not only for the documentary portion of it, but for 3 music videos. One's raw and edgy, one's kind of a ballad, one's unplugged. So we did the first round of interviews with survivors, including yourself, Becky, a short while ago. And I walked away from that with this visual imagery, and I hope to be able to use it in the project somehow, of just this. When you just said breaking chains, I thought that's exactly it. This project is going to break chains. I just see this idea of a stronghold being broken.
Amen.
And people being set free. I mean, between you and Dawn and Wanda, since I was not a victim, I don't understand it. But interviewing the 3 of you and talking to you, and then formulating some of this visual imagery in my head of how can we communicate this? You all resonated. First off, you all just glowed. There was a radiance coming from you and a confidence of knowing who you are. Not just who you are in Christ, but you're a person of value. You're a person who's beautiful. And you all had this, you embraced this freedom that came from within.
We actually experienced a transformation in the room. We saw somebody, I felt, one of the 3, well, I'll save it so people see it on the screen, but actually transforming from believing a lie to believing she was beautiful in the process.
That was a great moment. That was beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Whenever you wonder, are we just doing this? Are we just trying to force something? And then something like that happens and you go like, I can call myself the executive producer if I want to, but nonsense. I'm just sitting here being amazed by God doing miracles.
So good. And that's, again, that shackle perspective is just, that's that moment right there. And I know that when I first played the song for a little gal, it hadn't even been mastered yet or anything. And she just sat and sobbed, and she's like, no one has ever said that to me, that I was innocent. And that's one of those shackles that you carry as a survivor. The blame, and there's to people who don't understand it, they're like, how could you blame yourself for something so hideous? And one of the moments that I can't remember if I shared this in the video, but my high school counselor, she said, well, you need to go back to the kindergarten room and sit in those little chairs and see if you could really think that you are responsible for what happened to you and all the things that they did to you. And I remember sitting there that day, the same year, a guy named Steve Seiler's writing this song called Innocent Child in California. And I'm sitting in my kindergarten room looking at the little chairs and this little tiny teddy bear sitting in the chair. And I just started to cry, because I couldn't look at somebody else, but I had taken on the chain of it was my fault. So that is my biggest prayer, is that we will see people imprisoned for things that they were innocent of set free. And it's tough because actually one of my first trespassers was just released from federal prison for the same thing. Oh my gosh, what, 45 years later. But he's walking out there free, and I'm certain that all of his victims are still shackled in ways, and that breaks my heart. So my heart is just that this will help people be set free.
And just to show how God works, Steve, you and I, we had put together the treatment, I put together storyboards, the different music videos and what they would look like. And not even having heard Dawn or Becky or Wanda's testimonies. And all of them had shared elements in their testimonies that are elements in the storyboards.
Right.
We're
not that good. Well, Corey, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today. We have only scratched the surface of all the stories that we could tell. So obviously we'll have you back. Maybe we'll have you back when Innocent Child has been completed.
Sure.
We can talk about that. But God bless you and your family and your team at Storytelling and all the wonderful projects that you do. Tell people how they can find Storytelling Pictures so they can check out some of your work.
We do have an Instagram page, and it's storytelling.pictures. And we tend to post a lot of our international trips because we work a lot overseas. I just got back from Budapest and Bulgaria, and they can see what's happening on there. We have a website, storytellingpictures.com. That's about it.
Well, thank you for sharing today. I know I have been really excited for this conversation and have really enjoyed hearing stories, which there are many more that maybe we'll get to in the next time we're together. But thanks so much for being with us and sharing with us just who you are and your gifts and talents. And so grateful for your contribution to not just music for the soul, but really your contribution into our world to shine a light of hope.
It has been a delight. Thank you, guys. Love you both.
And we love you too, Corey. If you enjoyed the discussion today, please share it with a friend and give us a positive review on iTunes.
And please visit our website, musicforthesoul.org, where you can stream or download every song in our catalog. So that would include Innocent Child, Somebody's Daughter, Never Shake His Hand, You Should Hear Him Sing, and many, many more. Read our lyrics, our healing music guide, our blog post, and much more. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.
The staff here knows my name, knows my routine. I come in after work and stay till she's asleep. I sit beside her bed, she talks to me. The only son of her son, I am her legacy. She speaks my name, but then looks at me and says, won't you sit with me and stay a while? My grandson's coming soon. I know you'd like him, he's a lot like you. And you should hear him sing. We talk about the pictures on her wall, places she's never been, friends who'll never call. I brush her hair, we talk of Jesus' love, and though her mind is weak, somehow her faith is strong. We sing a few old hymns, but then she looks at me and asks again, won't you sit with me and stay a while? My grandson's coming soon. I know you'd like him, he's a lot like you. And oh, you should hear him sing. Yes, I will sit with you and stay a while. I know your grandson's coming soon. And when he dies, I know he'll pray for you. And I know then he will sing. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. The staff here knows my name.